Want for this to be a pretty chill conversation. And as Samra and I kind of pre-gamed ahead of time, as honest as possible. Thanks, Lauren. I don't know if I've ever met you before, but I appreciate the all caps and the heart. And I'm going to take that as a big fat virtual hug. I am the newish, I don't know if I can say that anymore, CEO of REDF, succeeding the inimitable Carla Javits, who is on the call as well. So people can give an all caps hug for Carla in the house too. And this is our first in good company, specifically for Farbers. Like, you all are a community that is 200 plus strong. And we realize as our own community that we haven't loved up on you as much as we would like. So this is the first of a series of what I'll call Farber Love Up. And I just want to give some context as to Carla, yes, as to what we're going to do today, where REDF is in this moment, and then give some context to the conversation we want to have with Samra, if that works for everybody. I mean, actually, I'm jealous of the food that you've got going on. Stay on camera because I love it when people are, fully in love with food.
Maria, it's lunchtime. I have to eat. So.
Absolutely. I'm all about it. I'm jealous, actually. Okay, cool. Like, don't love staring at me so large on my own monitor, but that's cool. Here's the good news. You all have been around for since 1997, if you can believe it. Since 1997, you've been around. There's over 200 of you. And what you have created, what we are, is in large part a result of what you've brought to this organization. So I used to work at one of our ESCs. For those of you that don't know me, I used to work at an ESC called Cara Collective out of Chicago. And my big motto there was, we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. So I guess I want to start out by just saying we stand on your shoulders. And this year has been a tremendous year for REDF. We had a couple cool milestones that we just surpassed. The enterprises in our portfolio collectively just exceeded 2 billion in earned revenue. For those of you that are the OGs that are from way back in the day, I mean, 2 billion, that ain't nothing. And we kind of feel large and in charge at this juncture. Like, we've got enough critical mass where we can demonstrate to small business, to the economy locally and nationally, that this is a model to reckon with and one that has a real shot at making for a more inclusive economy. Second big milestone we hit was the enterprises in our portfolio just exceeded 100,000 people employed. So people in our focus populations of folks impacted by the justice system, folks coming out of housing insecurity, folks struggling with mental health challenges and substance addiction, folks coming out of human trafficking and domestic violence. Over 100,000 people have become gainfully employed through the power of employment social enterprise, through the power of what you all have done in your work over the years. And third big thing this year is she said yes. Who's she? Mackenzie Scott. Mackenzie Scott just dropped 10 million in the bucket of REDF. And with that, we're using that to fuel not just the current strategy, but our strategy going forward. Speaking of the current strategy, we're at the end of the third year of a 5-year strategic plan, one where we had a goal to bring 50,000 people back to work through the enterprises. We've already cleared 34,000 in the first 2 years. And in this strategic period, we're seeking to prioritize leaders of color and leaders with the lived experience, or like we like to say at REDF, the lived expertise of whom they employ. And so we're learning so much in this period. And when we think about what we're learning, how we're growing, what that means for us, we know that a lot of what we've learned is through you and because of you. So this club that we're convening today, this is the first of a series. Somebody dropped in the chat, this feels like a precursor to a reunion. Well, you're right. We're going to have a reunion at Stuart's house, our founder of this program, who's also on the call with us. We're going to have a reunion in his beautiful home in March of 2024. So we'll give you more deets on that, because we'd love for you all that are local to join. And for those of you that are far away, you all make enough bank now, you can buy a ticket and come join us too. Stay tuned for that March of 24. Last thing I'll say before I tee it up for Samra is I love this program, not because I've ever been in it, and I'm not sure I would have been accepted when I was an MBA student myself for this prestigious program, not because I've been in it myself, but because I'm a customer of it. Maura, I believe, is on the call. She was my Farber intern back in the day. I've had many. We had many social enterprises. We've had many Farber. So I was a customer. I also currently have the gift of being a colleague. So now we've got so many Farber interns on staff permanently. It's just such a joy to be working alongside folks with this level of expertise. And Samra, our featured speaker today, is also a Farber alum. So customer, colleague, and I'm gunning for BFF. I want you all to be in the nook with us, with me. I don't know you all. I would love to get to know you. I would love to be a part of what is truly a fabulous community. All right, let's dig in to the conversation. Many of you know Samra. If you know Samra, give her some love in the chat so I can see who knows Samra of Center for Employment Opportunities. Show me the love or give me a heart, any of those things so I can see who knows and loves her. Yes, since 2012. Yes, Samra, all caps, all caps, all caps, woohoo. So I'm going to read you her bio, but effectively, if I were to just say in a nutshell, you know, the headline of Samra. Yes, leading the way in the best at showing compassion, grace, and leadership. The amazing Samra. Yes. Original head of the LA office. Yes, yes, yes. My title for her kind of life story, because I've been creeping on her from afar, just so you know, like we used to be kind of fellows in this work, and then now I've shifted to this side and you know, I creeped up on her because it's like, you are, Samra, you are all the things to which I aspire. You're a badass leader. You're a female triple threat in terms of leader at home, leader at work, leader of your 3 beautiful kids. And you're also modeling for this field what it means to scale and to scale sustainably. But badass and shero doesn't make for like an official bio. So let me just read the official bio so we get that straight. Samra Haider has spent over 15 years working to build and scale programming and pathways out of poverty for individuals who face systemic barriers to meaningful employment. Currently, she is president of the Center for Employment Opportunities, CEO, a national organization focused on enabling economic and social mobility for individuals who've been impacted by the criminal legal system. At CEO, Samra oversees all aspects of its program, innovation, policy, and strategy functions, including expansion into new markets. Prior to CEO, Samra worked for Next Street Financial. She also worked for REDF, also Oliver Wyman and JP Morgan Chase, a pale in comparison to REDF. Samra holds an MBA from the Wharton School, an MS from the London School of Economics, and a BA from Columbia University. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband, 3 kids, and apparently a cat. So there you go. That's Samra in her professional bio nutshell. Samra, awesome to see you.
Awesome to see you. Thank you. This is like so overwhelming. I mean, first of all the accolades are great, but it is really like, I don't think I've ever seen this many Farbers in one spot. So I too have been a Farber. I've managed Farbers. I've, you know, just been all around. So it's a very nice place to be right now. I appreciate it.
I love it. Well, that's a great way for us to start the conversation because we kind of wanted to get at, you know, what's your Farber story? Like you started as a Farber and it kind of informed your future career trajectory. Tell us a little bit about that pathway.
Yeah, and some of you might have heard this because I often say it when I'm interviewing Farbers, but when I went to business school, I was a management consultant and I just knew I wanted to go into the nonprofit space, but this was back in the day. So there wasn't as much going on then around social impact. So I had no clue. Like I was like, maybe I'll be a CFO of something. I have no idea. And then I learned about this program. And I think one of the things I was worried about was in my, you know, my summer between my first and second year, having an internship that was like, you know, I was stuck in an office somewhere, no one coaching me, no one managing me. And that would actually make me think like, I don't want to make this switch. It's somehow not resourced enough for me or not going to support me enough. So I found out for the Farber program. And I was lucky enough to both work at REDF and at a portfolio company. It was actually transitioning at that point. So it was a small portfolio. And it just like transformed everything about what I wanted to do because I was able to use my consulting skill set. I was able to learn about business operations. I just saw a way in which I could use the things I was good at, the things I was interested in, the skills I was in, that I was using to advance my career. I was also in, you know, it was a small but mighty, I see Meenakshi there, small but mighty cohort of a few other people. We, you know, met other alumni. And so I started to see a community of people that I could talk to. Because at that time at business school, you know, very few people I could even relate to in terms of what I was interested in versus what they were interested in. So it also opened up a whole field and a whole community for me, which was exactly what I needed. I think I wrote it in my LinkedIn post is like, for me, I needed confidence in like the decision I was making and what I was going to do. And that internship summer absolutely did that for me. So I came back in my second year, just like much more motivated, much clearer about what I could do and what I wanted to do. And then obviously just happened to be that because the community is so great at networking, I had stayed in touch, and then I ended up working at REDF right after my second year. So I got to kind of jump right into exactly where I wanted to go. And that's how I ended up in this space, basically.
And then post REDF, first of all, you saying that you needed something to give you confidence is kind of a mind blow for me, because I always see you as somebody with so much kind of gravitas in you and behind you. So that helps me feel better when I'm not feeling my most confident self. So thank you for sharing that. But post REDF, like, tell me a little bit about what the trajectory was from there.
Yeah, and so REDF was amazing. It was great. I think someone wrote it that I was in San Francisco. I got to open up our office in Los Angeles. So it was everything I wanted. I just, for personal reasons, needed to move back to New York, and I ended up taking a job that was in sort of the small business space, because at that time I still was very anchored in like, well, it's social enterprise, it's business. That's the thing that I care most about, is like the means of making this change. And so, no knocking the company I went to, I just like hated it. I went to New York. I was like, oh my God, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I left this organization I loved. I don't like this space. I don't really care about economic development in the way that I thought. So that was a tough moment for me. I really, like, probably the main time I've ever truly second guessed a decision professionally. And at that point, I didn't have a place to pivot, like business school or something that could like get me back on course. But again, luckily enough, Roxanne, who I don't think she's on the call, but she was my colleague at REDF. I was talking with her because that was who my professional network was. And she mentioned that CEO, one of our portfolio groups that I didn't cover, but she did, was looking, Sam, who's now my boss, became the CEO, and his role was open. And so I had met Sam a couple times, and I ended up having coffee with him, and I ended up switching and getting this job at CEO. And I think to me, it was really, I knew that I missed the mission. Like yes, social enterprise I love, but I really care about the people and who's being affected by that change. And I think I needed a moment to get out of that to realize that's what I wanted to do. And so that was 9 years ago. I ended up taking a job at CEO focused on really initially scaling our work. So at the time I started, we were in 9 offices, and now we're in 31. And that was primarily, my responsibility. And I do think, even though it was a much different scale of expansion, my first expansion was really with REDF going to LA. So I had a little bit of that there. But yeah, so that's what I've been doing. And obviously my role has changed a lot, but that's how I got to CEO.
And for people that are less familiar maybe with CEO, could you give the commercial on CEO specifically? And then maybe this is a good pivot for us to go into, you and I talked about your phases over the 9 years at CEO, how it was like most, team and then org or something like this, like help unpack the career trajectory over the 9 years at CEO.
Yes. So CEO, obviously, I think, as Maria mentioned, we are I think one of the largest social enterprises in the country. We focus specifically on individuals who are coming home from incarceration, primarily from prison, but also jail. CEO runs a transitional social enterprise. So people come, and within a few days, they start working for us. Might be a mantra many of you guys know about. What's unique about CEO, even in the social impact space, is we run a daily payroll. We're providing kind of constant coaching and feedback while people are working for us. And then concurrent with that, they're more traditionally working with a job coach and a job developer. So the goal at CEO is you work in our social enterprise, you get placed. We tend to place people a little quicker than other social enterprises. And then after that, we stay connected with folks for a year. So a lot of it is very similar to the core social enterprises, but we are really focused on that one population through our social enterprise work.
And when you think about your whole kind of leadership trajectory over that time, you'd given me this great analogy about first you focused on, was it like you and your own leadership, then the team, then the organization? Like, how do you see how that shifted over the almost 10 years you've been there?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of reflection lately, because 9 years is a long time. I think it's the longest time I've been anywhere. And so, yeah, in the beginning, you come and you're just like, go, go, go. Like, I want to prove myself. I want to do this. So it was a lot about like doing the thing, like growing it out, like building the system. And I think my leadership at that time was to model that behavior of, I'm the one going and launching the offices. I'm the one who's kind of writing the decks late at night. And so that was really important. I think, then it started to become a real shift for me I've always cared about the team I manage, but I think as the team grew, I think my orientation around what my responsibility was shifted a lot more around my team developing. And so it was really building in them the ability to create sort of a scalable system of growth, and less about me being the hero and more about them, you know, building those skills. And then, you know, over that time also, we went through a lot with, you know, COVID, with George Floyd's murder. And so I think, given that we're a population, our staff is primarily people of color, we have a staff that's, you know, very participants who are very marginalized. I think it started to shift even more. We're like, what I give to my staff, the leadership profile I have, is about how you build culture across all of our offices, how you tend to the needs of the people doing this work. And so it's not just about my team, it's really about, you know, the full scope of the staff. So like, people will say like, oh, you're so mellow, you're so like relaxed, you never get upset about anything. I'm like, no, that's like years of like practice to just like not get so rattled about every little thing, and really think about how important is this, and how I behave, how I respond to a challenge, you know, does get mimicked by other people. So I have to really think about how I respond to different things, and what I present to people, because I do think that that matters when you're building sort of org-wide culture, especially for us, you know, 600 people across 30 sites. It takes a lot to build a cohesive culture. And so I've spent a lot more of my time in the last few years, you know, thinking about that.
That totally resonates with me. I mean, we're a much smaller organization, only 70 people. And it's something that I focus on all the time. So tell me when you've gotten culture tight, like you're like, yep, we just landed it, and where maybe you got stuck and it didn't quite work in the way in which you had hoped.
Yeah, I'll start with the stuck part. You know, I think we're really big. We have large funders who are like, more, grow, scale, big. And like, you know, again, coming from business school, initially that was like, yeah, that's just the world we live in. You have to scale, you have to get bigger, it's numbers. But like, when you're in this work, especially in social justice work, after a while, it's like, well, it's about people and it's about each individual person. And I think there are times where our staff, understandably, was just like, what, wait, why are we growing? We just launched here. I need your help here. Why are you going to this site over there? And so I definitely felt responsible for like cooling the growth a bit. Because at some point it felt like we're becoming like, you know, the Starbucks of a nonprofit, as opposed to really thinking about, okay, we just launched in Los Angeles or Detroit. We need to build our community there. And so I think that was something that didn't just come from me. It came from feelings among staff and the team. But I think that it's a hard balance, because, you know, people want those things from you when you're large, to like be doing more. And I think I've over time very much bristled at that. More so, like, I'll do it grudgingly, and if they need us to show numbers, I'll do it. But to me, that's kind of not where I want CEO to be, and it's not who I want us to be in the communities we're in. I think, I don't know, on the culture where it goes is good. This is one thing that I can't take credit for. Since the day I started at CEO, and any staff person you meet at CEO is very oriented towards the mission. Like, number one, like, I've never met a group of people so singularly focused on supporting people coming home from incarceration. And I think one of the things I'm proud of is that we've maintained that, but we've done a lot around hiring folks with lived experience, more so in the last few years. We can still get better, we can still get stronger, but I think we put a lot more emphasis on creating real pathways to employment, supporting folks once they're at CEO who have lived experience. To me, that's like my baby, where I want to keep working on that. But to see staff who are former participants thriving, I think we have one on the Zoom ourselves, but that gives me like such joy. And I think that's something, I wouldn't say we've nailed it, but I think we've definitely pivoted in terms of our culture, where now we're much more of a culture of kind of welcoming staff with lived experience, and not just as a entry-level jobs, but really so that they can grow.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And on the first part of what you were sharing, you know, you're so large, to your point, that you have an amount of influence that maybe the smaller kind of enterprises don't have. And so when you say you've done some stuff with the cooling of the growth, if you will, like, how have you helped, if at all, shift institutional perspective around the value of scale versus the value of sustainability or whatever? Like, how have you changed hearts and minds as it relates to those with the power of dollars to enterprises like yourself?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I've actually shifted many hearts and minds. I try. I think sometimes, you know, you're probably way better than me dealing with philanthropy, but like, it's, you know, you have to give them the idea, right? So like, especially I think when people started talking a lot about racial justice and DEI, it's like you have to interrogate those feelings a little bit. Like, okay, so like, what does that actually mean in practice? And I think getting into conversations with some of our funders has been helpful. I will say it's not like they're like, yeah, I totally agree. Numbers don't matter. But one way we shifted was really getting them excited about the idea of us using our scale to support other groups, which I think obviously REDF as an intermediary does this already. But for CEO, I think that was a pivot we were able to make, which like rather than more ourselves, what if we were able to get more by building the field through the things that we're good at? So not saying that everyone has to run a program like CEO, but you know, we've been saying, oh, you can use our finance backbone, or you can use some of our compliance backbone, and that will help some of these smaller led groups. So that's been something that we've been doing and seems to resonate, where it's like you don't necessarily have to just like organically get those numbers yourself, but you think about what it means to like be a good partner in the communities we're in. So it's still there's always like the back and forth, but I have seen that have more legs with folks.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. I get it. But if anybody can kind of influence the tide, I think you all can. I'll do a commercial now just to say, like, as you're listening to this conversation, if you have questions that are coming up for you, please feel free to dump them into the chat. You know, Samra has committed to say all the things, so she's ready for it. Be ready to push her and me. I'm going to pivot a little bit and just say, like, doing this work is really freaking hard. It's like there are days when, to your point, where you might have joy over the moon, like you just said. I love having an environment where folks with lived experience are coming into our employ, and their careers are ascending. Like that's awesome. It feels like a home run times 10. And then there are days where it's just like, damn it, can I not just get a break? Like the slog of it is real. So I guess this question is more, you know, how do you kind of keep your engine revved when you hit some of those roadblocks, and how do you think through how to navigate through those times?
Yeah. You know, I think it is like time, like before, if we lost a contract or if we didn't get this thing, especially the stuff that's related to either, you know, money or even growth or whatever, like I learned to just be like, yep, you know, you win some, you lose some. Like you're going to lose things, you're going to get things. I think that just going through it a little bit in the beginning, it was like, oh my God, the world is going to fall apart if we didn't get this one thing. And that I think I've been able to deal with. I think where it's harder is the personal, when people don't succeed. And obviously we have a population that's like just deals with a lot, and just getting anyone a job or helping them get a job isn't going to change, you know, years of trauma, you know, a system that is unjust, like all these things. And so failure is just like a constant for sometimes our staff, for participants. And so that's harder for me because it's harder to see the solution set. You know, it's like, how can we move from like success, meaning 50% of the people we serve, to like 90% of the people we serve? And it feels like there's only so much you can do. And so that I find, you know, when I'm in my good days, I'm like, we can do it. We have to keep pushing. That's the challenge. But like, it is a profound challenge, whether you're talking about folks who have been formerly incarcerated or dealing with other, you know, barriers. And I think that it's just hard. And again, you have to look at the strength of who's, you know, it's not about me, it's about them. And how do I think about how to support them? So I always try to focus on like what we can do, but those are the times I think just feels big, and it can feel small when it's literally one individual person that doesn't succeed.
Totally. And also it's like sometimes when I was at Kara, the biggest joy was one person at a time. It's like not whether or not we hit the big goals, but it's like the one conversation, the one connection, the one time when the person is like dangling the keys to their first apartment and you're like, yes, you know, tonight they're going to go to bed with their kids in their care and their family back together and all good things. So going back a little bit to some of the leadership challenges that we experience, and particularly people, you are, I teed this up at the beginning, but you're a bit what I would call a triple threat leader. You're a leader in your organization, you're a leader in the field, and you're a leader because our lives are fully intersectional in your household as well. You are all the things, you know, and so how do you juggle it? How do you do it? How do you manage the expectations of all of these different kind of customers of your life, including the 3 kids and a cat? And I guess I'll throw the husband in there too.
The cat is the most demanding, let me tell you. It is definitely probably the hardest challenge is that it doesn't stop. So and this is not to infantilize our staff and stuff, but I feel like they're sometimes my kids too, in the sense of the way that I think about supporting and nurturing and growing them. It's how I think about my children too. And so there is a point at which you're kind of always needing to think about others and how they're doing, and you have to, present strength like all the time. And I think that is, again, I'm somebody that I appreciate that. I take that role seriously. It can be exhausting sometimes because you just don't have anybody to shoulder the burdens of what it means to have people's growth, people's livelihoods, people's, everyone's, and that, again, it doesn't, I'm not making that like I'm so important, but it's just a little bit of like that responsibility. And so I take that responsibility extremely seriously. But I do think, I've found times where like self-care, I really like literally, I think I still see like at 10 p.m. I stay up till midnight purposely. So like nobody bothers me except my cat. And I just sit there and I'm like watching TV and I just don't want anyone to bother me. I don't want to look at an email. And so there are things you have to do to like give yourself that time. But I think I have just gotten energy from that. Like I've gotten energy from being the source of strength or what people need across all facets of my life. And so that has helped kind of make me deal with like the stress of that too, as much as I can.
Yeah,
but
that's
it's
interesting.
a balance.
It's dual. It's like an energy giver and an energy taketh awayer, I guess. And so your 10 to midnight is a way to replenish yourself. For me, it's like NCIS binge marathons for about 24 hours to get it right and tight. The future of CEO, like what do you see on the horizon for your organization and your work?
Yeah, definitely this idea of like, we've done a good job of like having people, get a job quickly. We don't move people out of poverty pretty well, like that. They're still kind of in poverty, in my opinion, and factually. So I think that's something we're focused on is like, what does it mean to help people achieve mobility? Again, there's stuff we can do. I think we're doing more around pushing the system, pushing employers, pushing hiring practices. So I think now we're just seeing like, you can't just, it's not just you're going to upskill your way into getting everybody jobs. It also has to be like the system around has to change. So I think that's one big thing. And the other is this idea of like, how do you successfully support folks with lived experience to have career pathways, whether it's at CEO or other organizations. Like, my dream would be that we have some sort of like institute for people with lived experience where we're learning things and we're growing things and we have trainers and we have supports and we think about this group, not like as a, to other them, but more to think about like, what are the special needs that we can provide and think about cultivating this group. Because I think they'd make amazing leaders, definitely in the social sector space, but across the board. But I do think we need to do more than just the basics. And so that would be something, again, that I'm very passionate about that I hope that we could do in the future, given that we're, probably the largest employer of individuals with lived experience, or one of them.
In the country.
Probably. I mean, I don't know for a fact, but if you include our participants, yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. That makes complete sense, actually. And so we're kind of massaging and working with our own attempts at reframing narrative. I mean, I just spent a day with SoCal grant makers yesterday where our big theme was narrative is key. And one of the things that Manuel Pastor, he co-wrote Solidarity Economics and a bunch of other stuff. I think he's a prof at USC. Somebody can fact check me on that. But his big mantra throughout the day was, we have to stop talking about it as the economy. If we say the economy, we kind of refer to it as this immutable object that just kind of exists out in the ether. There's nothing we can do to shape shift it. There's nothing we can do to crack it open, to make it more inclusive, to open certain pathways, blah, blah, blah. He's like, it is our economy. It is a malleable object that we are feeding and taking away from and shaping all the time. So in a similar vein, we're going through our own journey at REDF where we're thinking about, is it simply people with lived experience, or is there a way for us to reframe that narrative and emphasize that people with lived experience have lived expertise, and kind of flip the orientation that we have around individuals with these experiences. So how does that resonate with you? Like, what holes might you poke in that, or how would it fit into the larger narrative shift?
I mean, I think that narrative definitely fits of just like, think about, there's not one kind of skill set people have, or there's not one kind of trajectory people have. I'd say the one thing I think is just like, we have to stop deifying capitalism. We have to stop deifying like the current economy we have. And I think that's a little bit, I know at REDF, there's a tension there. I think when you run any social enterprise, there's a tendency to feel like, how do I make business people feel like everyone's worthy for what they need? And I think there's a little bit that we have to kind of think about what's the right balance? Because I understand we got to make it work in the real world scenario. And I also feel like, you know, I'm a little bit more skeptical of like just, you know, Joe Schmo CEO saying one thing about how they want to hire someone who went to prison and they're going to change everything, because it doesn't work that way. So I think I definitely agree with you, but I think it goes further than just the folks we're hiring. It's really pushing people to think about, you know, how we can reimagine, you know, the full scale of it. And, you know, that takes a lot of coordination among lots of actors, but I do think that needs to happen, because I think if you just keep status quo of where we're at, we're only ever going to be on the margins of getting few people in. We're not going to get scale achievements, not to bring it back to scale, but we're not looking at scale, get people in those jobs.
Scale for the right reasons, I suppose. They're sustainable scale for all the right reasons. So you kind of hinted at REDF and REDF's role. I mean, this is an opportunity for you to opine on us. Like, what advice do you have for us as we think about, you know, we're about to do a strategy sprint next year to help shape 2026 to 2030. What kind of tips do you want us to walk into that process with?
Yeah, I think I mentioned, I mean, I can't even remember what I said on the call, but I remember being like, yeah, that was a good thing I mentioned. But, you know, like just like CEOs, one of the largest social enterprise. I mean, REDF is by far definitely the largest like kind of convener of social enterprises and probably people with barriers who seek employment. And I think just for me, REDF leaning into that role more so, I think there's sometimes where I see REDF being like, oh, we're technical assistants, or we're going to help you get there. We're going to like kind of take a back seat. And it's like, take a front seat. Like we need leadership over the sector. And I think you're positioned really well. Like, I mean, the numbers are amazing that you just said in the beginning of the call, but it's like, with that, how do you actually have more of a viewpoint on like what the vision should look like? And I think you've done it. And you know, you and Carla and everyone have shaped this so well, but like, I think you can go further. And I think you can kind of, I think we all want a voice behind us who has the like cachet, and also, you know, you're an intermediary. So it just helps a little bit, like you have a vested interest, but a little bit differently than if like CEO said something. So I just think as we think about social enterprise, we do need to think of ourselves now as a real sector. And with that, like, what is the leadership we need from a policy point of view, from a like legal point of view? There's a lot going on. And so I would just say, just keep leaning into that role, because no one is going to get mad at you in the social enterprise space for doing that. Because like, we're like, yes, please help us. So that would be my main thing.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think we struggle with the kind of desire to be a thought leader, but not sound like an ass, to be honest with you. So like, what is the balance between thought leadership and thought humility, and at what point on that continuum should you stand? So it's really edifying to hear you say, hey, girl, lean in. Much appreciated. All right, I'm rounding out to my last two questions. So that is a shout out to the room. It's for you to ask Samra anything you want to know. So I'm down to my last two. What's the best advice you've ever received? Give the people some wisdom.
The best advice, again, I think I said this before, like this is actually back in my consulting days, my one of the best first female bosses I had, one of the best ones I've had next to Carla. She told me to, you know, never run away from an opportunity, run to something. So like, if you're ever in your career and you feel stuck, you don't want to run away from that. Like, think about running to something. So I think that was helpful, because there are times where you do want to run from the position you're in, or you're like, oh, I hate this. But, you know, grass is not always greener. Things are not always better. And I think you have to think about like, where do I want to go? So that's been just really helpful for me. I mean, there are times probably at CEO, I might have run away, but I'm so glad I didn't, because I think about what am I going to and what do I have now? And so that's been super helpful. I don't know if this is advice, but I want to give Stuart a shout out, because when I was an intern, he told me, you know, what are the things that REDF needs to do to make the Farber program the way you would think about your alma mater, the same like loyalty and allegiance you'd have to your alma mater. And so I, as you can tell, like am very much loyal to REDF. And so I think keep doing what you're doing on the Farber side, because and I'm probably not loyal to my business school alma mater, because it's like, I think about, you know, how the care and the support you give people. I think that at this time in your career, it's a very important way in which the Farber program connects and cares. And so not really advice, but it's just something that's always stuck with me about like how you create bonds and loyalty in a professional space. And I just think what you guys continue to do is really, really strong. And so just keep giving the Farber program the love, because we need it in terms of the social sector.
No, we want to do it even more. So I appreciate you saying that. And that might be a good segue to my last question, which is apropos to the theme of this little chitty chat. You know, what does being in good company mean to Samra Haider?
I love being in good company. I love favorite thing at CEOs when I visit our offices. I think it's just when you are having fun and breaking bread with people who are like committed to the same thing you are, like that to me is like, I'm in good company. Like I love these people. I love their commitment. I love their joy. I love their vulnerability. And so I do think like that is something for anyone who is in this space. I love my coworkers back in the day, but there's a different kind of love I have for the people that you kind of go through these like really heavy things with. And so I think it's being with those people in those heavy moments, but creating times to enjoy too, and just let loose and have fun with each other too. And so that is my favorite thing about CEO, and it's definitely something that's important to me. So that's what I think is being.
I love it. I love it. Of course, first big question comes from CJ. When you think of the other employers, not ESCs, that CEO or you have dealt with, is there an example of someone who's getting it right? And if so, what are they doing?
There are, but they're mostly like small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses. And honestly, I think what they're doing is like they care. Like, it's not like you're just dealing with some like random manager that kind of heard this directive from a CEO, but it's someone who's like, oh, yeah, my cousin, they were incarcerated. I understand, and they actually like take care to grow and support you. So and I think that would matter for any employee, not just someone with lived experience in the justice system, but it's like you really think it's employers who have a good track record of developing staff, of caring for staff, who are like staff forward, I think tend to make the best employer partners that we've seen at CEO. And unsurprisingly, we haven't cracked the nut, unlike large companies. And so that's an area I think we can try to think like what's going on there. Why can't we make the same inroads?
Maybe the pathway is like, how do we find the small company inside the big company? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Staff forward. That's a great frame. Next up from Max, you're going to have to tell me how to say, is it La Fortune? La Fortune? What are the best opportunities you see for Farber alum or otherwise to engage with the social sector and dedicate their skills time when not currently working in the space? That's a great question.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, we could create certain spaces or you could, you can do it in the current state. But I mean, one is this. So like just staying connected, like I think creating a professional network where even if you're not working in this space, you're adjacent to people working in the space, you're proximate to people working in the space. Like even this one webinar, hopefully it helped you to have a little bit more light on people with lived experience in the legal system. So you're gonna take that with you. But the only way you can do that is if you're proximate to people doing the work. And so I think it's pushing yourself to make sure your circles are in those networks. And again, not to push the Farber program, but you obviously have a natural one right here. But I think that's super important. I also think if you are interested, I will say CEO, we do volunteering okay, not great, but we are often looking for, and there's definitely staff at REDF who have helped, looking for professional support that's probably like pretty bite-sized. Not that everyone wants to do extra work in their other careers, but like nonprofits are always looking for like specialized expertise, and it's difficult even for CEOs. Sometimes it's really hard for me to find someone who can do like a quick, literature review or something like that. So if you are available, I think it's just like, whether it's through REDF or other networks, like even allowing for knowledge that you have some expertise to give, I think really helps, all social enterprises, and definitely even ones of our size.
Yeah, and I think if I might add something to that too, is like, Samra, you hinted at this as well. There's a bit of a knowledge exchange that I think we'd love, which is if you walk away from a call like this with greater understanding of the issue, like facts, like it's 6 to 8 times more likely to be convicted of a crime if you're Black or brown than if you're white. And you just take that little nugget to your next cocktail party and you have a conversation with the person next to you about some of the injustices in our society. Even that, you're playing a deep role in narrative shift in the country. Thanks for the question, Max. Next up from, is it Ale or Rosie? Oh boy, I think I'm killing people's names. Please hit me later. What networks other than REDF have helped you in shaping your career in the sector?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's networks, but it's like when we expanded, we definitely took a lot of time and care to like build relationships locally. And so like networking, whether it's a reentry community, a workforce community, or like just specific people in communities, I think for me, what's really helped is like, yes, it's America, but like what happens in Memphis is different than what happens in Philadelphia, than what happens in New York. And for me, it's been really helpful for me to like build relationships, understanding a local context and what's happening locally, for just my own awareness of how different policies, how racism, how all these things affect populations in different places. I mean, working in California is like totally different than working in the South. So I think for me, it's less like these large networks and more the like local community-based networks that have been really helpful for me in like building a side of me that's like less corporate and B schoolish and more like community oriented. So that's been super helpful.
Love that. Next one is from Tim. How are CEO and REDF grappling with the systemic challenges that impact people who have experience with the justice system, i.e. voting rights?
Oh, I mean, voting rights, we do a kind of trying to get people to vote campaign. I think CEO over the past probably like 6-7 years, we've delved into policy more initially. And this is like, I think where, and I know REDF is sort of potentially on a journey around policy as well, but like, it's hard to know how far you go when you're not an advocacy organization yourself. And so our trajectory on the policy side has been like slow and steady. Where first it was like, we got to get more resources to our community. But I'd say now, after doing it for a few years, a few things that we've majorly done is really tried to organize as best possible our employees, our participants who have lived experience to actually be front and center in advocacy. So that's a big part of what we want to do is like teach them the skills of advocacy, bring them to the legislature, like do things that kind of put their voices more in the forefront. I would say one area that's big for us, again, I mentioned it earlier, is we're doing a big push around hiring exclusions, whether it's background checks, whether it's sort of like, baseline qualifications. And, there's a lot of other people doing that work, but I think we can bring some voice being a provider. And then I know with REDF, I think we've jointly tried to work on things like better access to public benefits like SNAP, better support for people who are earning wages while they're doing job training. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, and REDF's been like an incredible policy partner to CEO in the spaces we have. But like it is, I would say it's just hard when you're not primarily advocacy to know exactly your role. So it's a bit of a journey.
Yeah, it's a bit of a pick and choose, and also like a kind of how do you affiliate with the coalitions that have the greatest expertise in the topics that you care about too. And Tim said he was asking, because I live in Florida where there was much excitement about extension of rights to ex-felons, but that promise has yet to manifest. I hear you, Tim.
And I will say Florida, like one of the places we wanted to go, it's a very challenging state. So when it comes to, I understand the dynamics. And so that is a particularly challenging state to work in, but not that we're not going to do it, but yeah, that one's a hard one. So I'm
apparently Tim is all in when you're ready. So
yes,
I think he's a cosign right there. Brian says, for Samra, how do you balance your time and resources between systems change items that are maybe longer term and less in your control, or certain, i.e. changing hiring practices and policies of employers on the one hand, and things that are more in your control and immediate, like CEO's operations and work on the other? Curious how you prioritize or allocate.
It's definitely shifted more. I think I have like very great teams doing this work, so that's been awesome. I probably lean more into like the operations side. I think because we scaled so much, and that was like, a lot of my thing, I'm really focused on making sure the operation is shored up. I have incredible leadership over our policy team, and I think they're very good at understanding like the long view. So one, I think you want to hire people who have the experience and know-how. Like immediately I was like, yeah, we should just like run this campaign and do this thing and we'll change it. They're like, hold on. Changing hiring practices is like a 10-year opportunity. So I think that you just have to kind of set goals that are incremental and make sense, but are realistic. And again, with policy and advocacy, I've done a lot of learning and I've built up my skill set a lot more. And it's not like this immediate thing that you might have when you're, doing a business or something like that. Like the timeline is long. And so I think having the right people who can engage that, and then having the right interim success measures is really important.
Yeah, and I think too, they probably mutually credentialize. Like you can't evangelize on policy without a shored up operations where you're executing and getting results. So the two, in some degrees, kind of work in lockstep as well. Meg Rudy tees up, what are the levers outside inclusive employment that you think need more attention to help unlock economic mobility?
I mean, the workforce dollars are pathetic in terms of like how they're oriented, how they're accessed. Like, WIOA is like the largest funding stream that goes towards helping people who are disconnected from employment, and it's so annoying to access. So I definitely think like the resourcing we do in terms of government funding could be way easier, way more seamless, and way more accessible to particularly, the folks we serve. It's very difficult to reach the outcomes we ask for our participants. And so a lot of the training work we've been doing is just trying to even set a benchmark for what success looks like. So definitely I think the resourcing on the person focused side, the employer practices, and then I think, like I said, government policy, like surprising, even in places I think are super progressive, there's these like very archaic policies around who can get jobs, who can't. Sometimes things like public benefit access, in some of our states, if you have 1 or 2 drug convictions, you can lifetime ban from getting SNAP food stamps, which is like wild to me. So there's just a lot when you unpack the laws, and what's challenging on that is it's not like, oh, these are all federal laws. It can be like literally like a specific city's law that can exclude people from either getting the resources they need, the opportunities they need, or the funding they need. And so it's quite a lot. It's quite a lot of things to balance.
Yeah. And for those of you that don't know, WIOA stands for Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And I guess, as you could probably tell from Samra's comments, it is neither innovative nor are there a hell of a lot of opportunities. It's a lot of challenges to kind of access these dollars is basically the point. Tracy says, I see a lot of ESCs, CEO included, as working to make existing systems more equitable, which is a super important goal. However, the conversation nationally is moving towards dismantling those systems. How do you balance these two complementary but also different priorities?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have, I wouldn't say we're totally in the dismantle space, but we are moving in that trajectory. But I don't know, it's hard because it's like, we're nonprofit. We get a lot of money. Honestly, we get a lot of money from the government primarily. We actually don't get a lot of money from philanthropy, but when you do get money from philanthropy, it's primarily driven by people who, have made their money through the system. So that's difficult. That's actually not the biggest problem. It's just, as I mentioned in the previous comment, where do you start? What do you dismantle first? Like, how do you approach this when, a lot of our participants are like, I don't know what you're talking about. I just want a job. And so there's a little bit of like, trying to meter your own kind of like progressive bona fides with like the actual needs. And so I don't have a good answer. I don't think CEO will ever be on the like abolitionist spectrum, for instance, for reentry, but I think there's a movement towards at least playing a better role and being a better partner for folks who are on that side of the trajectory. And then, listening to your staff, listening to your participants on the things that particularly resonate with them, like what's particularly unfair, what's particularly challenging. And so like this issue of background checks, I mean, that's something I saw, but it was sourced by our organizing team that's staffed with entirely people with lived experience, and like they're very passionate about it. So it's making sure that you're asking the folks who are most proximate to that, what are the policy issues we should be most focused on.
Yeah, completely makes sense. Okay, next up is from Esther. Hi, Samra, so good to see you and all the other old school Farbers and REDFers. Hi, question for you. How is CEO responding to shifts in the nature of work, knowledge economy, gig economy, virtual work, et cetera?
Oh, and I'll chime in that Gordon asked a very similar question, so maybe combine them.
Smush. Gordon's question, how do you think about the future of work, e.g. tech automation, remote work, aging population, and its impact on participant employment going forward? Are there opportunities you're excited about or threats that you're trying to address proactively?
Yeah, someone else just asked me this yesterday. Wonder, the whole like automated drivers and stuff, like, yes, an issue. It's like so far from where I can think about it right now that I'm just kind of like putting it aside. I mean, it does bum me out a little bit that AI is like doing the cool things and like not substituting for the shitty things. Sorry, I know this is a webinar, but that's beside the point. I guess where I see it as an opportunity is that a lot of the time we spend is like resume writing or like talking through, what you might be interested in doing when you've literally been incarcerated for like 10 years and you have no clue. And so if we can power AI to both take away some of the administrative components of preparing for a job that are challenging, and then actually like, again, I'm like no tech person, but like helping to create a vision for a future that people have been robbed of. Like that would be cool to me. Like that would be something that is different and no one's done that. And I think, again, I don't have lived experience, but a lot of the folks I talk to, it's like, their sense of what the opportunities are when they come out are so limited because it's, incarceration is such a limiting experience. And so if AI could be powered to like grow the sense of what's available and opportunity, like I'm all for it. And I think it's pretty cool. It's been helpful for us on things like writing resumes and stuff. And so I don't want to be naive. I'm sure there's gonna be a problem on like, replacing workers and things like that. Right now, that's not our primary problem. It's more getting people opportunities that are actually present because of the barriers that exist.
Right on. And Max's question was kind of right in that alley too on AI. So it feels like we've gotten through the tech challenges of the day, and right at 12:55. Any last burning questions that folks have for this phenomenal woman? I'm scanning the room, looking at these very handsome Farber alum of the club that I could never get into if given the opportunity. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to give you some closeout and some context, and then we'll open up a little after party because I'm sure people just want to say hi to Samra, like for real, for real. So we'll finish the formality of it and then, let you all hang out and have a reunion. Sarah, can I ask you to pull up those last few slides? While we're doing that, I'll just say, Samra said at some point in her comments, I think it was when I asked her about what does in good company mean to you? And she said, this feeling of being alongside people that have deep commitment, that have joy, and that demonstrate deep vulnerability. And those three things is kind of the alchemy of being in good company. I love that. And I feel like she manifested that today, right in these last few minutes that we've all had together. If you agree, give her a heart or a something in your reactions. And as I close out, so we started this conversation talking about our intentions for this community. Our intentions for this community is like, you are a beautiful part of what makes REDF REDF. You are a fundamental aspect of what got us to these milestones that we were celebrating at the top of this call. And we want to do a better job of loving up on all of you and of making this community capable of having spaces and places where people can come together and stay connected. So like I mentioned in the beginning, Stuart so kindly offered up his home, which I hear is pretty dope. So I'm very excited to go there myself. Thanks for making this an excuse for me to get up in there. But Thursday, March 21 in San Francisco, we'll be back at Stuart's home for a Farber homecoming. If you're local, we'd love to have you. And if you're not, we'd love for you to consider a trip. Why not come to San Francisco in the spring? It's lovely that time of year. And also, next slide. There are a couple ways that we would love for you to stay connected to us, if you would be so kind. Many of you are part of a group that I think Jeff and maybe Maura and Gilly started some time ago. We're also starting a REDF kind of owned and operated page so that the organization can maintain it as well. So feel free to follow that page on LinkedIn. We'd love to have you connect with us in that way. Certainly sign up for our newsletter. Certainly help us build the pipeline of great candidates, of junior U's, mini U's that would be great candidates for our Farber program. We would love to have you help us evangelize for it. That could be as easy as posting on LinkedIn when we're posting for our Farber program, or as more fun as filming yourself for 15 seconds and saying like, yo, I went through this program. It was amazing and I think you should do it too. If you would consider any of those things, we would greatly appreciate it. And finally, if you're not done with your holiday shopping, go give the holiday gift guide a look-see, redf.org/social-enterprise-gift-guide. Coolio? Such a tremendous honor for me to chat with you, Samra, and to be a part of hearing more about your story. This was awesome. I learned a ton, and I love feeling the love of all of you in this room. We're going to take me off of a pin and just give you all a moment or 5 or 50 to connect. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate all of you.
Thank you. And Maria, you would have been like president of your Farber class if you applied.
Yeah, we shall see. Love, 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 love. Unmute yourselves, people. Say hi to her.
Hi. Oh my God, this is so crazy. I feel like Christine.